Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Life's Legends, a podcast where we talk about the stories that have shaped and guided us through life. I am once again here with my good friend Daniel, and we are once again talking about The Lord of the Rings. We'll focus mainly on the movie trilogy, but there will be book spoilers too. There's just go experience The Lord of the Rings, and then come back and listen to the podcast. But all month we're doing Lord of the Rings. This is episode 2. Today we're going to be covering the setting and the medium that we found this, that we experienced this story in. So let's just jump right in.
Sounds good to me.
How do you feel about the setting of the Lord of the Rings? Start wherever you want.
Yeah, it's hard to know where to start with that, because Middle Earth is the setting of the Lord of the Rings. It's where it takes place, and what a world, what a world for it to take place in. In the books, Tolkien spared no detail whatsoever. He created an entire world, complete with vast, changes in landscapes, huge mountains, huge marshlands, volcanoes and plains and woodlands, and just everything. And it's an amazing world that Tolkien created, and it's something where that world is really brought to life. You get to imagine it in the books, but in the movies you get to really see it. So the Lord of the Rings movies were shot in New Zealand, and as a result of that, one of my dreams, I should have mentioned in our previous podcast, one of my dreams is to go to New Zealand. I would love to go to New Zealand to see not just the places where the Lord of the Rings were shot, but just New Zealand in general, because it is an amazing looking place. But it's something where you get to see some of that grandeur of Middle Earth, those towering mountains and the great rivers and streams, the woodlands, the fields. The thing is, the story of Middle Earth is so grand, and because it's so grand, it requires a grand background, I think, in order to suit it. And you get that with the Lord of the Rings. You get this vast, majestic landscape that serves as the backdrop. You get these stunning views of mountains, and you see they're also not just the geographical things, but there's also the movies help to bring out the man-made things as well. You get to see the city of Minas Tirith, this huge city that is built into the side of the mountain. You get to see the Black Gate of Mordor, and how intimidating that is. You get to see Edoras and the Golden Hall, and Helm's Deep, the mighty fortress in the mountains, and Isengard, the tower and the forges around it. You get to see the beauty of Lothlorien and Rivendell, and the idyllic peacefulness of the Shire. You get to see all of these places, all these classic and iconic settings of the Lord of the Rings. And then so you get the geographical setting, you get the man-made, I guess, setting, and then you also, in addition to that, you get the setting of the people, the ethnographic, I guess, setting as well. You get to see the world that it's set in. You get to see, I think we'll be talking more about the power dynamics later, but you see, the elves and how they view the world, and the dwarves and how they look at it. You see the kingdoms of men like Rohan and Gondor. You see the hobbits of the Shire, and of course you get to see the orcs and the Uruk-hai and the wild men and all those different, all these different groups and how they interact with each other. But it's something where Middle Earth is just so incredibly detailed in all of those ways. It's it's detailed in its geography and the man-made structures and the cultures and the races and everything. It's just such a incredibly detailed world, and it's almost like you almost get overwhelmed by it. Like, you know, if you're just coming into it, you're just like, holy cow, there's like how am I supposed to make sense of all this? And, you know, eventually, you know, you learn to. Then you become a nerd like me. But it's something where it's so detailed, and there's something that draws you into that. Because it's, you know, it's so detailed. It's like, this could be its own world, you know, and it's something you just get drawn into that. You get drawn into the culture and into the land and into the history, and I don't know what else to say. It's such a cool setting.
Yeah.
I don't know what you would have to add to it, but
I mean, that was a great explanation. So I'll say, as like someone who is not very familiar, right, with Lord of the Rings, I came into this from what I had known as a child, or in high school when I watched these movies. And for whatever reason, I'm starting to wonder if I watched the movies, but I didn't remember at all the setting, the scenery that these stories take place in, that Middle Earth is. And like you said, New Zealand being the place that they filmed is gorgeous. I mean, incredible.
Oh yeah.
But I found myself in this watch through, we would get to new kind of settings, places in Middle Earth, and literally just, they were breathtaking.
Mm-hmm.
I was like amazed. One of the things I can remember, and this isn't even like my favorite place, I'm tipping my hat again, but this isn't even my favorite place, but like they get to the marshes, the swamps, I don't know what the name is.
The Dead Marshes, yeah.
Oh, well, I could have probably gotten that one if I shot enough darts at the board. Yeah, the Dead Marshes. I remember seeing that vast landscape and just being like, this is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
That like just all of these different landscapes exist, and that they're like parts of the story, which is what was impressive to me, is that every area we went to, that we saw, was somehow important. The
Right.
geography of this world is important to what's happening.
Yeah, like you see that in like when the Fellowship is trying to cross over the Misty Mountains, so that they can pass over and on the road to Mordor. Like that geography, it plays a part. You know, they try to go up over the pass of Caradhras, and they can't. You know, there's a snowstorm, and a lightning storm that keeps them from passing over, and so they end up having to go through the mines of Moria instead. Another amazing, location. But yeah, you're right. It plays into the story. It's not just like, oh, this is a nice, peaceful, or this is a nice backdrop for what's going on. It's, oh, this affects the story in some way.
The setting massively affects the story. The places we go to are super important. Mm-hmm. But then even sometimes this world is like, I can tell. And obviously, we're talking about the movies. I watched the movies for this episode, right? And not even the extended cut. I didn't even do my homework, But, as watching the movies, I'm thinking I probably got the least amount of info about some of these places, right? That there's probably more info other places. But I can tell just from watching the movies that there is so much history and scale to this world that is just simply not part of the Fellowship's story, not part of Frodo's specific story, but that there are countless other stories that happen in this place. I think about I'm going to say Balrog. Am I saying it right?
Yes, that's
Bingo.
right.
The Balrog is not important if we're taking Gandalf away. That's important to our story here. But there's more there. As a movie watcher, I'm like, I want to know many more things about what this is, why it is. And this is just like a side note, right? It's not, Gandalf has this fight with the Balrog, and like there's history here. These mines were the mines themselves.
Yeah.
These incredibly, intricate and detailed mines built by these dwarves. It's an incredible world. It is such an incredible world to go through. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that they're like the elf language, you could learn it.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually fleshed out enough.
Oh yeah.
That you could learn this fictional language.
I have to shout out my brother Joey again, because I don't know if he can speak it, but he knows at least some of the language.
Wow.
Like he will write things in Elvish to me, and I'm like, that's great, Joey. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't translate that. I'm like, I wish I had that dedication. I'm just trying to wrap my head around Hebrew right now, because that's important for
Right.
seminary. But
Right. Yeah, I'm focused more on the Hebrew, the Greek kind of stuff. But just that level of detail that Tolkien adds to this world, almost unnecessarily, he's going over and above in creating this world, I think adds depth.
Oh yeah.
To this story that wouldn't be there if that wasn't the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. He does go over and above and beyond as far as detail goes, but it's something where, sometimes you're like, Tolkien, you're adding so much here. But like there's something that draws you in with that. That you're like, this is like its own world. This is its own, and you're right, there's so much history in those locations. There's so much history with Moria. There's so much history with the Dead Marshes. There's so much history with Gondor and with Rohan and stuff like that. And you hear little bits and pieces of that throughout the movies. But like for me, since I've read the books and I know a little bit more of the history, I'm like, man, there's so much they're leaving out. But I can understand why, because if you did, like, the movies, like, the extended editions of the movies are like 3.5 to 4 hours long. The extended editions.
Right.
If you put in everything that was in the books, like, you'd have to basically have to make a TV series with like so many different episodes. And
Yeah.
I won't get into that, but I think Lord of the Rings is better as movies than as a TV show, because I feel like with TV shows sometimes it gets too choppy.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that they keep everything together, but I will say, if you sit down and watch through like the extended editions of The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King, those are long movies. They are amazing, but they are long, and there's so much in them.
Yeah. I didn't even watch the extended edition, and I was like, these are long movies. It's the movies almost made me, and not almost, they did make me, like, intrigue me about this world. So I almost think that this is like a good entry point. You know how some like adaptations, it's like not a great entry point to the story. You actually don't want anymore. Watching these movies, I'm like, I do kind of want more. It almost makes me want to go read the books to learn about this world.
Yeah.
Because I could tell there's so much here that we only had time to like touch, to just walk by.
Yeah, like one. Not to belabor this, but like one example of this is like, I don't know if it's included in the regular edition of the Fellowship of the Ring or not, but there's a scene where Aragorn is taking the hobbits to Rivendell, and Aragorn, they settle down for the night, and Aragorn is sitting there and he's singing this song, and Frodo wakes up and he hears it and he's asking about the song, and and Aragorn explains it's called the Lay of Luthien, about an elf named Luthien who gave her love to Beren, a man. And Frodo just asking, well, what happened? And Aragorn's like, well, she died. And doesn't say anything more than that. But in the Silmarillion, there's several chapters devoted to this story, and it's regarded as an epic tale of the history of Middle Earth. And it gets this little tiny shout out from Aragorn in the movie.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, there's so much there. There's so much history there. But again, it's something where you can only fit so much into the movie. So.
Right. Yeah. It's an incredible setting. It's an incredible world. I did want to touch, because this is a fantasy setting, obviously not all stories have what I'll call power systems, which is somehow, if your story has combat in it, you have some kind of power system, even if that's just what we normally have, which I'll say Lord of the Rings is pretty close, right? Men fight with swords. We know that. We know how that works. But there's more here. Obviously, there's more here. The Ring of Power is different. We don't have that. How do you feel about how they deal with the powers that exist in the world?
So this is one question that I wasn't as prepared for.
Hey, that's all right. That's all right. I only ask this because I'm so confused about what wizards do. I just don't understand them sometimes. I just sometimes Gandalf, I'll be like, wait, can Gandalf do this? And it seems like the answer is no. Other times I'm like, I had no idea wizards can do that. And then in the beginning of the movie, when Gandalf and Saruman are fighting, I'm not entirely sure what they're doing to each other. Sometimes it looks a little Force-like from Star Wars.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if you knew any more about what wizards do, because they confused me.
Tolkien I think Tolkien even doesn't really give a set definition of these are the exact powers and abilities and capabilities of the wizards. I don't think he really gives that. I think he just kind of says, wizards, can do things. They can cast spells. They have a certain, they have certain abilities in combat. They just are in general more powerful than, than normal people are.
Yeah.
So I guess, it's not really well defined, what exactly wizards do. So.
Yeah.
But we know that wizards use magic. They can use spells, and we know that obviously Gandalf uses his power for good. But then there are wizards like Saruman who use their power for evil. Right.
Yeah, I was just like, wait a minute, what's happening? Why does it look like Gandalf's breakdancing in the middle of the room? I saw that in the first movie. I think my wife was there, and I was like, I think I out loud was like, what is happening? Why? Why is this happening? It's funny, and I'm sure part of this is the movies have to somehow portray whatever the book described,
Right.
And that's just hard, to do.
Right. Ironically, that scene was not really brought out in the books very much.
I figured.
In the books, I think Gandalf was just kind of locked in the tower and didn't really say this is how it happened. But
yeah. One other question I had, and I don't know if you noticed this, but when they came out, I don't know if you remember the Hobbit movies. I read the Hobbit book as a kid, and they came out with several movies.
Yeah, there were 3 Hobbit movies.
That's what I thought.
They stretched out the Hobbit.
Yeah.
We could do a whole other podcast on the Hobbit.
Yeah.
Although actually probably we wouldn't, because personally, no offense to any listeners out there, I don't think The Hobbit is nearly as good as Lord of the Rings.
There we go.
So
you heard it here.
But I won't get into that.
Yeah, I remember watching these movies, and a lot of the company is dwarves, you know, that are on that adventure.
Yeah.
And I was kind of shocked in the movies. There seems to be, with the very notable exception of Gimli, where are the dwarves? I just like I expected to see, because we see the elves more, right? Obviously, we spent time in I'm gonna say Rivendell.
Yep, Rivendell, and also Lothlorien too.
Oh yeah. So we see like elves more, and I guess to be fair, we don't spend a whole lot of time in dwarf places.
Yeah, I mean, Khazad-dûm was, you know, it was a dwarven kingdom, but then it was overrun by the Balrog and by the orcs.
Right.
So, yeah, the dwarves are much more present in The Hobbit. I will quantify my earlier statement too. I like the Hobbit. I like the Hobbit book. I don't like the Hobbit movies.
Yeah.
But yes, the dwarves are much more present in The Hobbit than they are in The Lord of the Rings. Although it's something where the dwarves are there, but they're just not talked about. Like there were like at the same time as The Lord of the Rings, like Sauron was actually sending out armies to attack the dwarven kingdoms in the north. You just don't hear that. The kind of talking about like the little bits and pieces of history and what's going on. There's like this little snippet where they're getting ready to ride for Gondor, and Gimli says to Legolas, "It's like, oh, you know, if we could just summon up a battalion of dwarves, then we could really, you know, do some damage." And Legolas replies to him, he says, "Your kinsmen may have no need to ride to war. I fear that war already marches on their own borders." And that's basically like the only little snippet we get of like, oh, Sauron was attacking them up north as well.
Yeah.
But that's kind of an aside.
Yeah. I was kind of like, that's the one race we saw the least of in this movie, in these movies rather.
Right.
Get mainly through Gimli, maybe only through Gimli. Yeah.
Gimli's the main character, who's a dwarf. Yeah. I mean, you see a few dwarves at the Council of Elrond, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I really like this world. This is such a cool like setting.
It is. Yeah.
It's very cool. So this probably is a good time to ask the listener question: what is your favorite location in The Lord of the Rings?
That is a good question, and that's
a hard one. There's a lot of good ones.
My answer just wants to be yes, but I know I have to answer. I know I have to pick a place. So like, as much as I love, you know, the epic locations of, you know, places like Minas Tirith or Helm's Deep or something like that, I have to go with the Shire.
Yeah?
The Shire is the
That's
place
cool.
where I would want to live. You know, if I could live anywhere in Middle Earth, I'd love to live in the Shire. You know, just the green, the peacefulness, you know, friendly hobbits, getting to eat like 6 or 7 meals a day, you know. That just sounds nice to me, you know?
Yeah.
But
yeah. That's a good pick. That's a very nice, wholesome pick.
what about you, Luke?
Mine's Minas Tirith.
That's awesome.
That's the first time we see that city.
Oh my goodness, yes.
I literally was like, and I mean, I showed you, right? I changed my computer background based on what podcast I'm doing every month. It's Minas Tirith is the background of my computer. The first time we saw that city, I was literally like, my jaw dropped open. I was like, that's incredible. It looks incredible, and all, like I said, there's so many locations that made me go, whoa, and I have no earthly idea what it's called, but Frodo, Sam, and Gollum go to the front gate, but they're gonna climb up a mountain.
Is it the Green City?
Yep.
That one is called Minas Morgul.
Ah.
Here's a little Middle Earth language for you. Minas Tirith means Tower of the Watch.
Okay.
The word Minas means tower.
Okay.
So Minas Tirith is Tower of the Watch. It watches over Mordor, watches over that area. Minas Morgul, it used to be called Minas Ithil, which means Tower of the Moon, but it was captured by Mordor, by Sauron, and taken over by the Witch King. And so they renamed it to Minas Morgul, which means the Tower of Sorcery.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was crazy to look at. It also looked incredible. Minas Tirith is so cool to me. It just looks really cool. I will say, the main rock face that juts out.
Yeah.
I saw that. It looks amazing. I saw that and I was like, someone's gonna fall off that thing. I don't know who, but somebody's gonna fall off or run off while they're on fire. But somebody's gonna fall off that thing. I was just like, yeah. It's such a cool city. I thought even about, and this kind of transitions us, into our next section, but I thought even about how difficult it would be. And I don't know how much of, like, that setting they would have built and how much they would have edited in, like CGI, use CGI to put in there. But assuming it's CGI, right, which is what I kind of assume, especially those big sweeping shots, right? I assume they didn't build a whole city in New Zealand. But the amount of time and detail that it would take to animate all those frames, it's incredible. It looks incredible. I mean, what a job well done.
Yeah, I think with I think if I remember correctly, with Minas Tirith, they did build an actual physical model of the city, like a smaller one. But like they had to like CGI in like the people moving around in the city, and they had to like especially like the scene where like Gandalf is riding up to the top, like they had to use a lot of CGI there in order to create that scene. And by the way, that's such an epic scene, like as they're going up through the different levels of the city, getting up to the top, and you get to just see these vast sweeping shots of the city. But yeah, like they definitely had to do a lot of CGI in order to, for those vast armies and for the, for helping to create that world.
Yeah. You know what I just thought of that I didn't want to lose is one thing that the setting and sometimes even the shot composition of the movie really helps understand is just how immense this task is of getting the ring to Mordor. Like sometimes you come over a horizon and you see a landscape like the marsh and you see how big it is and you're just like, oh my word, and that's not even the end. If I get through that, and then when they come up, I'll never forget when they come up, they're in Mordor and they've just dealt with the little tower of orcs that they're in, and they come up and they see the whole land and all the orc camps spread out and everything, and just like thinking how far away it still is. Just I think it really lends itself to understanding how monumental this task is, especially for two hobbits.
Two little hobbits, yeah.
I know. Yeah, but so this is an adaptation, right? We're specifically going over an adaptation of the books. So as an adaptation, how do you think the movies do? Like, do you think that they're a good adaptation? Do you think they add, take away? What do you think?
We could spend a lot of time talking about this. So one of the reasons why I love the Lord of the Rings movies is that I think that they are very, very faithful to the books. There are some differences, to be sure. I mean, last episode we talked a little bit about them. We talked about how they change Aragorn's character a little bit. He's a little bit more hesitant in the movies than he is in the books. Obviously, because the books are so detailed, not everything from the books can make it into the movies.
Right.
But I really think that the movies do an exceptionally good job of staying faithful to the source material. And they do so in a way that I feel like there's always that argument of like, movies have to be different from books because not everything is compatible. But like the way that the movies adapt the books really does well at adapting that source material. Like it takes what happens in the books and it really just brings it to life. It's something where like I know like there are definitely some points where when I'm watching the movies I'm like, well, this isn't exactly how I envisioned the books. Like maybe like for example, like there's one scene where they're looking out towards the city of Osgiliath. They're looking out from Minas Tirith to the city of Osgiliath in the river. And they're looking out towards, and you can tell they're looking towards the southeast. And you're like, well, actually on the map, Osgiliath is to the northwest. Or to the north, or to the northeast, I should say. It's to the northeast of the city.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, I envisioned it looking a little bit differently because of that. But that's not something I'm going to pick a fight over. I'm not going to pick a fight over that.
Sure.
Like the Pelennor fields, like I've always pictured them as more of like there were like farms and like some barns here and there and houses here and there and stuff like that, and not just like this. Like I kind of like envisioned Minas Tirith as kind of like more like kind of like having a few outskirts settlements and then you had the main citadel, rather than you have the city and then you have just like nothing around it.
Yeah, it is kind of barren right around it.
Right, but again, I'm not gonna like pick a fight with that.
Sure.
It's something where I'll recognize, okay, this is an adaptation.
Yeah.
But overall, it's something where it helps. I really think that the movies help to bring the books to life. They give you something epic to look at, and it truly is epic. Like when you look at like some of those dwarven chasms in Khazad-dûm, and when you see the bridge of Khazad-dûm, you're like, wow, like this is amazing. When you get to see that visual representation of Minas Tirith as Gandalf and Pippin ride up over that little hill and they see this just massive, amazing city.
Yeah.
I mean, your jaw drops, like you said, and you're just like, wow, this is awesome. It's the same way with Helm's Deep, or with the Black Gate, or Minas Morgul, or Mount Doom, or any of those major, or Rivendell, or any of those locations. You're in awe, and it brings out the books, I think, really, really well.
Yeah.
And that's just from a visual perspective too. That doesn't even get into like, the story itself. And again, I think it really remains faithful to the story, and it remains faithful to the spirit of Tolkien. Of course, it doesn't follow exactly. There are some differences here and there. There's some things added in for plot tension, like Arwen being more present, like the Gollum creating the rift between Frodo and Sam.
Wait a minute. Hold the whole phone.
Oh boy.
Is that not in the books?
No, it is not. Not even close. In the books, there's like absolutely nothing about that at all.
So here's the thing.
Luke's doing a face palm.
Yeah, here's the thing. So I already loved Sam, as we discussed in last episode. The only times in this whole story where I was like, I don't know about this, Sam, was those times. And you're telling me they're not even in the books.
Nope.
I just love Sam. Sam's just the best. Crown the king. He's the best.
Yes. Yeah, forget about Aragorn. No,
I'm just kidding. Yeah, don't worry about him. But I didn't even know that. Because that's kind of a reoccurring thing in the movies. I mean, they do that that kind of builds itself.
Yeah, you kind of build it, and especially like in the Return of the King, there's kind of that scene.
Yeah.
And again, I can see why they did that, to add in a little bit of plot tension. Again, I'm not gonna pick a fight. I don't like it. That's one of the adaptations that I'm like, I don't know if I like that one as much,
Yeah.
because it kind of takes away from the whole, like, just the bond of fellowship that Frodo and Sam have. But again, I'm not just gonna pick a fight on that one. I can see why they did it. So
Yeah.
But it's something where for any deviation from the book, and for any part of any adaptation that I don't like, there are at least a dozen reasons for me to forget about it. Because like the rest of the movie is just fantastic. So
Yeah. And that's what a good adaptation ought to do, right? It should be faithful to the source material, but be able to like bring that alive, in a way that wasn't necessarily the case before. I think that's cool. Yeah. Obviously, having actually never read the books myself, having them read to me as a child, I didn't know how does this really stand up to that. But that's cool to hear. And we kind of talked about this, but the cinematography itself, how the movie's filmed, I was blown away by all these shots.
Mm-hmm.
These like sweeping shots that they do. And I already said how I think like a lot of times those wide like swaths of land help us to be like, this is a monumental task. I think it's very good. I don't know if you have anything else to say about that other than I loved it.
Yeah, no, I can't say much either, except, in addition to like those sweeping shots of the landscape, also like you kind of apply that to like the enemies that they face. Like for example, like at the Battle of Helm's Deep, a lot of that is CGI.
Yeah.
By the way, the CGI for 2001 and 2 and 3 and 4 like was really good.
It's incredible. It stands up today.
Yeah.
I have no complaints in 2023 about that CGI.
It looks pretty realistic. Like if you look closely, you're like, okay, well maybe. But like again,
Sure.
we're talking about early 2000s,
Yeah.
Like so like the CGI is fantastic for the movie. They do well with Gollum. They do well with the armies, that you have. They do well with like, the just like different like sets like Minas Tirith or things like that. They just do a great job.
It is incredible. They do really well. I can't even. Gollum is CGI. Like all of Gollum is not there.
Right.
when they're filming.
Like they motion captured him, but like it's mostly CGI.
Which is incredible. He looks so good for like an early 2000s. Yeah. They're very well done. I mean that's some of the best early 2000s CGI I've ever seen. It still stands up. But so the soundtrack is a big part of this movie, or these movies, I think. How do you feel about the soundtrack?
Once again, we could be here for hours.
Yeah.
So Howard Shore is the one who wrote the music for Lord of the Rings, and he just did a phenomenal job. So the story of Lord of the Rings, as we've talked about, it's such an epic story, and there are so many different settings. We see the different landscapes, we see the different people. It's an epic story with lots of things going on, so it requires a diverse but also grand and majestic soundtrack. And holy cow, does Howard Shore deliver.
Yeah.
He delivers a soundtrack that is fitting for Middle Earth.
And that's no light task. I mean, that would be hard.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a tall order, and he does it. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Some of the it's something where in a minute I'm going to just shout out a few of the soundtracks that are my favorite. But I think what I love about it is it it stands up to like the grandeur of Middle Earth. You know, the themes and the music that you get, it fits with what's going on and with what you see and what's happening. But also, I think one of the things that I love about the music that Howard Shore writes, the music of Middle Earth, is that it helps to bring out also the emotions that you're feeling in the film. It suits the action in which it overlays. So like, I just wanted to shout out just a few of the soundtracks, and like, seriously, like, after you're done listening to the podcast, like, you should just go on YouTube or Spotify or whatever it is you use, and check out these soundtracks. I mean, all of them are great, but I just wanted to shout out a few.
Yeah.
If you start even with the first one, the first soundtrack in the Fellowship of the Ring is called The Prophecy, and that soundtrack is the opening. If you just listen through that, like, you just get this sense of like, we are about to embark on an incredible adventure. We are about to enter into an amazing world. There's such a power behind, like, it just grows and grows, and you just get this powerful moment as the Lord of the Rings appears on the screen, and you're just like, it draws you in. In the Fellowship of the Ring also, you get, if you listen to the soundtrack concerning hobbits, you get to just hear like the fun, carefree, peaceful, idyllic nature of the hobbits and of the Shire. The Ring Goes South is a soundtrack that has the Fellowship of the Ring, their theme. You get this heroic theme as they're heading out on their quest. They're starting out on the quest to go to Mordor. Also in the Fellowship of the Ring, there's A Journey in the Dark, which, as you can kind of guess by the name, talks about going through Moria, and you can just feel the darkness and the heaviness of going through Moria. You just hear these low bass voices singing dwarven chants, and like, it's just amazing. It is awesome. As you go into the Two Towers, you get there's one soundtrack called the Uruk-hai that starts with the Fellowship theme, but then it gives you some of the evil themes. Like, you get Sauron's evil, sinister theme, and you get Isengard and Saruman. Like, it has this like interesting, like, off-kilter industrial sounding theme to it, as it's looking at like the orc forges and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Rohan has a great theme too. You hear that in The King of the Golden Hall, another great soundtrack. And then Return of the King. Again, like, there's so many great soundtracks. I'm just trying to focus on like some of the best ones. But in Return of the King, there's one called The White Tree that gives you Gondor's theme, and it's the theme for the lighting of the beacons, which, by the way, another phenomenal scene. I love that scene so much. But The White Tree kind of brings out the theme of Gondor, this proud, spirited theme. There's also a theme. There's also a soundtrack for Shelob's Lair, and oh my goodness, like, so Howard Shore, I didn't know this until a little bit later on, but Howard Shore composed a lot of music for horror films, and he's good at it. Like, and in Shelob's Lair, you feel the evil, the fear, the darkness, the, oh my gosh, there's a spider nearby, it could jump down and like start wrapping me up in a web any moment. Like, you feel that fear, but then it ends with like a heroic note as Sam comes to Frodo's rescue. And then just the last two soundtracks I just wanted to lift up are the Black Gate Opens and The End of All Things. Those two soundtracks just capture the gravity of the end of the Return of the King, the climax, the high point, or like the most suspenseful moment of the entire trilogy, what everything has been leading up to. In the movie, or in those soundtracks, you hear the music that accompanies that last desperate battle to try and distract Sauron and the destruction of the One Ring of power. So I just wanted to shout those out because I mean, even if you're not necessarily like an orchestral music person, like I would still encourage you to check it out, because there is just a weight and a power behind this music that you just cannot put it into words. It's just amazing and incredible.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's so good. And it does exactly what you said. It does, the whole soundtrack is fantastic at adding that weight and that emotion sometimes behind some of these scenes. I think a lot of even times, I specifically felt this when I think both of the speeches that Sam gives, how they have the Hobbit theme playing in the background. It just there's something it does to me to recenter at the end of some of these movies. It's the whole soundtrack does an incredible job. I am totally with you. I could not do it as much justice as you did, so we'll just move on. But it's great. It is absolutely fantastic.
Once again, listen after this podcast is done. Check them out. Seriously, you won't regret it.
Yeah, they are so good. I 100% agree. Absolutely. So that brings us to one of the final aspects of the medium, which is the acting. Obviously, movies, an important aspect of them are who's actually on screen and who takes on the role of these larger than life characters. I don't know if you had any thoughts about the actors who ended up playing the various characters, but yeah, what'd you think about that?
I think they're all great. We talked about in the last episode about how great the characters are in the Lord of the Rings, and that doesn't happen unless you have good actors behind them. Ian McKellen, he's a pretty famous actor, but he plays Gandalf, and he just does such a great job. I love the way he speaks his lines. If you just listen to the way that he speaks, there's just something about he sounds so elegant and so graceful, but so authoritative, and he delivers the powerful lines he delivers with conviction, but the joyful and jovial ones he's joyful about. And he just does, every scene he's in is just great.
I appreciate that almost all across the cast, how they're able to deliver. I quite literally think The Lord of the Rings has some of the most memorable and impactful quotes ever.
Oh yeah.
And I think that a lot of this cast is able to deliver those quotes, even though they're kind of in this Middle-earth-ish kind of bent. Obviously still English, but a little different, more old high English maybe.
Yeah.
But they're able to deliver these lines so well. I think across the board they do great. Obviously I think Ian McKellen is an amazing actor in general, and definitely knocks it out of the park as Gandalf. But yeah, I think a lot of these actors are able to, and actresses are able to deliver these lines that I think would be hard to naturally deliver very well.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of having a hard time delivering lines, Andy Serkis also nails it as Gollum. That's a hard task, to be able to, have the two different personalities playing off of each other, and also speak in the way that he does.
Yeah, right.
It's something where Gollum has such a distinct accent, and you even see that in the books. When Tolkien writes Gollum's lines in the books, and Andy Serkis sounds like he's speaking straight out of the books. Wow. Which is just amazing. It's no easy task to be able to voice Gollum, and Andy Serkis just nails it.
And how, I think I could close my eyes, I think, as he's having these conversations, as Gollum has these conversations with himself, and I bet you I could tell when Smeagol's talking and when Gollum is talking. And obviously they're the same accent, they're very close, but you're right. I mean, he does such an incredible job of inhabiting that character with his lines that I think I could tell which one was supposed to be talking, even if I didn't see the visuals.
Right.
Yeah, he does incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I lift up Ian McKellen as Gandalf, Andy Serkis as Gollum, and also Viggo Mortensen does a good job with Aragorn as well.
Yes.
Quick note about Viggo Mortensen: he did a lot of his own stunts himself.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of the sword play and stuff like that in the movie, that was just him. His trainer said he's the best swordsman I've ever trained.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
So that was really cool. And since we're on the topic of Aragorn too, I have to say this too. I think it's in the original version of the Fellowship of the Ring. There's a scene where Aragorn is fighting against the one big bad Uruk-hai general. I think his name's Lurtz. It's never mentioned in the movie, but that's what the name is given to him.
Okay.
But at any rate, there's one point where Aragorn and this Uruk-hai Lurtz are fighting, and Lurtz takes out a dagger, and he licks it, and he throws it at Aragorn, and Aragorn just whips it aside with a sword.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That was a real dagger being thrown at his face. It was accidental because the guy who was playing Lurtz couldn't see with all the prosthetics.
Oh yeah.
So he was gonna just throw it into a tree next to him or something like that, but instead he threw it right at him, and luckily Viggo Mortensen just gets up and goes and literally Peter Jackson, the director, is like, "Did you get that on camera? Tell me you got that on camera."
Yeah. I'm sure. He's like, "That was it. That was real. We got it."
Viggo Mortensen is just amazing. I will just say that. That's
incredible.
That's just the stunts. He also just does a great job playing Aragorn.
Oh yeah.
As well, just bringing out the ranger side of him, but also the kingly side of him as well.
Yeah.
For sure. So I just lift. Those are the three big actors that I would lift.
Yeah. I didn't know he did it in stunts. That's so cool. I'm so glad to know that. And I think you're totally right. He brings out both the Ranger and King very well. He's able to kind of inhabit that really well. Yeah, I liked all the actors. I can't think of anyone that I didn't like. I'm not as familiar with the books, and so I'm not really comparing how they live up to that character so much as I am just I just think they're really good acting in with lines that might be hard to deliver. They can pull it off, and they don't make me think for a minute they're being fake or, it feels like they're real, these are real characters. So yeah, I really like that. I thought these were great movies. Even just as movies, they're great. Obviously, incredible stories with incredible depth, but the movie making itself was quite incredible. Definitely, even for its time, we talked about. The CGI and stuff like that was incredible. But yeah, before we wrap up, do you have anything you'd like you must get out about the medium or the setting?
Not that I can think of. So.
All right. Well, there we go. Then we're done with episode 2, the medium and the setting. So next month, as I said last episode, I'll have my friend Cliff on the show, and we're going to dive into the video game, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. So if you have any questions you would like us to answer about that, email me at lifeslegendspod@gmail.com. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to Life's Legends. Please like and subscribe and comment. And until next time, savor your story.